For those of you that are panicked about your Christmas cards not being ready, I have the easiest way to get beautiful cards that have your own flair to them. This is Jen Lee with Jentastic Journey, and today I'm going to help you get over your panic. So I first picked out pattern paper, and they have a little bit of a scene behind it, and I'm going to create a bunch of die cuts from these metal dies that have poinsettias, and I'm just putting them on a darker red, and then I also have a Merry Christmas that has a shadow and an insert piece. And then if this pretty pattern paper, sometimes when I cut out dies, especially for flowers, I like to use a patterned paper because it just gives it a little bit more of a dimension look without having to add a bunch of dimension to your card. My goal here is to have fairly flat cards so that I don't have to pay any additional postage for Christmas, and then see how beautiful that looks with the pattern paper. I'm struggling a little bit because the pattern paper I'm going to use is very vintagey, so I'm trying to figure out how to put some poinsettias on there that will match that same vibe, so the vintage vibe. And then this is a very, very intricate Merry Christmas die, and again it has that shadow, and then I cut the shadow out of that one as well. So I have lots of options for my poinsettias. And then for the leaves, because the coloring in that pattern paper is a little bit different, I'm taking out some of my Stampin' Up! Stamp pads, and I will link everything in the description box below, but this is Old Olive, and then I used Garden Green, and then I used another color, and again I'll link them all below, but just very different colors. And then I went with this Wild Honey as well because I thought maybe some of the leaves and things in that pattern paper look a little yellowy, and then I also took out my Vintage Photo Distress Oxide and tried to make it look a little bit more vintage that way. So I'm just throwing a bunch of color down so that I could cut out some leaves and also some additional sentiments. And if you had perfectly colored paper, that would be fine too. I was just trying to get a little bit of dimension again, and I can do that when I have all this splotchy ink down. I'm going to pull out some additional leaves so I can have lots of different options for the leaves. I didn't make a big enough blob for my Merry Christmas, so I had to go over where the leaves were supposed to go, but that's okay. We can always adjust. And then I'm going to throw some on this yellowish, brownish color as well. And I'm going to die cut those out as well, and I'll pull all of those off, and then we'll start assembling. Okay, now I'm going to cut the pattern paper in half because it's actually two half sheets are attached. And then I'm not much of a measurer, especially when I'm kind of at the end of my card making for the season. I'm like, I'll just wing it, and it works out pretty well. So that's a 4 1/4 by 5 1/2 card. So I'm going to then move this matting layer to be about a 1/2 inch less. And then for the pattern paper, because I don't want to cut off all of the print off of one side, I'm going to trim a little bit off of each of the sides. And that would be more like a 1/4 inch or so all the way around. I don't want a huge matting layer, so it's just going to be a little bit less than a 1/2 inch. And again, I eyeballed most of it, so if I need to adjust, I will adjust. But when I put this up there, it actually looks really good. And then I'm going to use my AdTech tape. It's a tape runner that I really enjoy. And again, I'll put everything in the description box below. And this is great. You do have to kind of line it up because once you stick it down, it's stuck. And then here I'm just going to play for a minute and decide where I want things to go. Originally I thought this would be more of a vertical card, but I'm going to flip it over and make it more of a horizontal card. Here's where I turn it around. And then the colors were feeling a little bit bright compared to the feeling of the pattern paper. So I decided to put some Vintage Photo, which is my go-to when I want to make something look more vintage. And I'm just putting a little bit of that brown ink all over each of the pieces. I ended up putting it all over all of the different leaves of the poinsettias and the greenery itself. Then I decided to start gluing down at least the sentiment itself so that I would have a better idea of where I needed to put my poinsettias. And the sentiment works a lot better when the card is horizontal like this. This is where you need a really good glue. I'm using Barely Art Precision Craft Glue because I'm going to get glue all over this shadow piece. This glue dries matte. You can never tell that I've gotten glue all over that, trying to get that all in place. Next, I decided to pull out my glass platform, and I'm just going to make the green a little bit darker. Again, I'm really struggling with the colors in that pattern paper, and it doesn't really match any of the colors I have in my different inks. So you just start blending the inks. And here I'm just cutting down the second card. I decided I'm going to put the cards side by side, and that way I can have a better idea of what I'm doing. This is how I cut down paper. I will push it out like a quarter of an inch from the card base, and then I will snip it off on each side, and then it usually matches up with my card front and my matting layer. So try that if you don't really feel like measuring a lot. It usually works out fairly well. Here you can see I didn't quite cut enough off of that pattern paper, but snip a little bit off and we are good to go. So I'll adhere that down with my AdTech tape runner. Okay, then I'm going to bring the two cards next to each other, and then we're going to get assembling. Again, you could do this with any dies that you have. So if you have little bells or little trees or other Christmas type flowers or ornaments, take a pattern paper and just make some die cuts and some die cut sentiments, and you have yourself a beautiful Christmas card. These are intended to be stacked on top of each other. If you don't mind having dimension, you can add a lot of dimension. You can curl those leaves. There's a lot of different things you can do to give this a little more excitement, but I'm trying to keep everything fairly flat so that I don't have to spend an additional amount. And so here we just assembled everything and trying to keep a little bit of the same leaves on either side, and that's why it was a little bit easier once I put all of these together. And then I decided to go with a second smaller poinsettia on that one card, and then here you see I'll start to glue everything down. And that's as simple as it is, and then we'll do some embellishments here in just a second. I'll show you the final product as well. I really liked this with the green and red. Let me know which one you liked better. They both looked pretty, but I really liked this green color, even though it doesn't really go with the green in the pattern paper. It allowed those leaves to look like they matched something. And again, I still have the tittles, or whatever you call the dots to the eyes. I still need to do something with those because I did not pull the green or the red over from those. I tend to lose those and sweep them all into the garbage and don't feel like going back after them. So I'll usually put a gem embellishment or a sticker or something on those, or I'll draw one in, but you don't want to miss those. So here I'm going to just do quickly the inside of the card, and I just decided to use my little leftover scraps. I am a person that if I don't have to put away scraps and try and use them somewhere else, I am much happier. So I love to be able to tie everything together with this beautiful pattern paper and the corresponding colors that I used. And an easy way is just to put it in the corners. You can also, I sometimes put it along the sides or along the top and bottom, whatever floats your boat there. I thought this looked really pretty when it was in the diagonal. And so this has 3 layers, but they're thin layers, so I'm not going to have a problem with the post office. And then I think that just came out really, really pretty. That is actually an off-white piece of paper. You could see here I decided I wanted to move that, and that AdTech tape, any tape runner is really sticky, so you just got to be careful. But that is an off-white paper. The cream didn't look quite right with it, so I went with off-white. And I liked how that one came, so I'm going to do one, but I'm going to do it in the other corner. All right, so now on to the embellishments. So I bought this year some Wink of Stella in gold, green, and red, and I have used them on almost all of my Christmas cards because I think sparkle is what card making is all about. So I put a bunch all over this, and it's hard to see in that light, but I put it all over the poinsettias. I put it everywhere I could, and I think those came out really, really pretty and plenty of room for you to write. And then I'm taking my very flat, I call these my fake embellishments. They're just stickers. They're flat stickers, and I will include these as well in the description box, but these are really nice because it gives a lot of shimmer. It's not going to give you any actual dimension, but it looks like dimension. And so that's what we need when we're trying to make these flat cards look really pretty. And I think this helps out quite a bit. But doesn't that add just a little bit more sparkle, and they look like gems? So I really enjoyed this card. I hope you enjoyed it. Here's a close-up of each one. Please join me in the other videos where I'm showing you how to make really quick, really flat, really easy cards for this holiday season. Please don't forget to like and subscribe to my small channel. I'd love to see you in future videos, and you have a wonderful holiday season. I'll see you in the next video.